Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Loyani, and in the previous video we used the control flow if and else to render different UI states in the product card. In this video we are introducing a new concept, writable signals, which we actually already have learned in one of the previous videos, but today we're going to do a deep dive. We will use a search input in the products grid as our example, and in the next video we will continue the development by filtering the results using computed signals. So if we go back and we take a look at the hello HTML that we have created, we have already created a writable signal. A writable signal means that it's a signal where we can update its state. So in this case, we have a count and double count, and in the count, whenever we are increasing the counter, we are updating its value and adding a value, and then when we are clicking on the decrease button, we are also decreasing its value. Today we're going to do something similar, but we're also going to learn new concepts as we're learning a little bit more about writable signals. So for today's video, we're going to do something similar, but a little bit different as well. So we're going to open the products grid and we're going to add a writable signal for the search item. So to do this, we're also going to declare a protected read only, because again, we're not changing the object reference, we're only changing the value within the signal. So in this case, we can have it as a read only. And I'm going to call this search term. As this is a signal, we will declare the signal, open closing parentheses, and we're also going to initialize with a value. By doing this, we are declaring this as a writable signal. So a quick recap, this signal for search item creates a writable state with initial empty value. So now we're going to go back to the template, so products grid HTML. So now we're going to update the template to bind an input to the signal and also display the current value. To do this, we're going to be using a couple of imports from the Angular material so we can display a form field here. So let's go back to the Angular material documentation, components, and here we can see the input. So basically this is what we're going to do, just adding an input field. So to do this, again, you can go back to the examples, you can check out some of the example source code so you can see the name of the HTML tag or the directive that we have to use, but I am more interested in getting what's the module that I have to import for the API. So from the API, we're going to get the mat input module. If you like to do this, you can just go ahead and come back to your products grid and add it to the import. And if we go back to the example, you're also going to see that we need other imports as well. So we have the mat form field, which we're going to use. We're also going to add the input. And if we go back to the TypeScript, we have the component, the icon, the button. We also have the forms module. This form module is actually allowing us to link back what we have in the HTML, for example, with the input, and bind it with the value that we have. So we're going to do something very similar here. So let's go back to our component and do it from scratch. We already have the mat input module. We're also going to add the forms module to our imports list. And in this case, since we're also going to use a mat form field, which is this component right here, we're also going to need to import that mat form field module. This way we have all the imports done, and then we can just focus on the HTML code. So let's add a mat form field. We're also going to style this with a search field class. And I'm also going to add the appearance as outline, so we also have a little bit more styling. The appearance will come directly from the mat form field. We're also going to add a label, so in this case it's going to be mat label, and we're going to call this search products. We also need an input, so this is just the regular HTML input tag. And to add the style, we'll add the directive mat input, and I'm also going to add a placeholder, which is, for example, I would like to search for headphones. So with this, if we go back to the browser, we will have a search product, and then when we clicked on it, we have the focus on, we can see the placeholder. Now we're going to bind the input into the search item signal that we have created. And how do we do that? We're going to go back to the input itself. I usually like to put this after the directive and before any placeholders, but you can add this in any order that you like. Open, close, square brackets. And I'm also going to open, close, parentheses. So this syntax is what we call banana in a box. So it's a shorthand for combining input and output binding in one line. If we go back to our hello example, we can see that for property binding, we have used the square brackets, and for event binding, we have used the parentheses. So in this case, we're going to do both at once. And Angular also has a special directive that belongs to the forms module. That's why we have imported this little guy here. That's called ngModel. So the ngModel, it's going to bind the input to the component state. And in this case, we're simply going to add the search term. So starting in Angular version 17, the template binding understands writable signals. So using ngModel with this syntax, the banana in a box syntax, aligned with the signal works. There's also an expanded mental model. I'm just going to add this for information purposes only. So instead of using this shorthand syntax, you could also do first the property binding. So we'll use the ngModel and you will use your signal. In this case, since we are doing the property binding, we'll need to add the getter function from the signal, which is open and closing parentheses. And for reading the events that are going to be fired when the user starts to type inside this input, we would use an event binding, in this case, open closing parentheses, and then the ngModelChange. And here we will use the search item as well, or the search term. However, we don't need to do this anymore. The shorthand syntax works, and personally, I prefer to use it as well. So here's how the flow works. The signal value populates the input, the user types, and then the signal is updated with the new text. So if we go back to the browser and if we start typing, for example, headphones, we cannot see anything. So let's add something else just so we have that visual effect. So what I'm going to do next is I'll just add a paragraph. I'm just going to style this a little bit for a search preview, and I'll add a search term. And here we're going to use interpolation as well, adding the search term. So going back to the browser, as we start to type, adding or removing values, we can see that the search term is also updated in real time. Let's go back and add some styling as well to the search term. So we have added 2 classes. We're also going to add 2 classes now. I like to follow the order, so this is products container. So right after products container, I'm just going to add my style. And this is what it's doing. The display block in the search field makes the material form field behave as a block element. So it respects the width settings in this case, which is 100%. This is going to stretch the search field to fill its container horizontally, which is the full width of the screen. The margin 0 on the search preview removes the default paragraph margins, so the preview text sits tightly below the input. And the color is just using a software material design color token, so the preview has a secondary importance and it's not exactly as black as the text. And to prepare ourselves for the next video, we're also going to add 2 helper methods here on the TypeScript. So again, this is what I like to do. First, I'll declare all my properties and then I'll start adding my methods. For the helper methods, since the user is going to be typing in the input, I would like to do 2 things. First, I would like to reset the search. So in this case, we will just set the value back again to empty. And when the user is typing, sometimes what we can do is just add additional spaces. So it will be nice to add some trim to help within the search that we're going to implement in the next video. So the first one is going to be a clear search. We will make a reference to search term, and because we're making a reference of the search term inside this method, we have to use the keyword this as well. So this class, this component, search term. If we would like to completely replace the value, we will use the method set. So in this case, whatever we have typed before, it's going to be completely reset to empty strings again. And the second helper method is going to be to trim the search. We're going to do something similar again. We're going to use the search term. However, we would like to calculate the next value from the current one. So instead of using set, we're going to use update, can take a function as its parameter. So we're going to use a value. So this is the current value that is within the signal. And we're going to also use an arrow function. And all we will do is just trim the value. And this is how we update an existing signal. By using the update method, we get its current value, and from the current value, we can compute or calculate a secondary value and update the value of the signal. So in this video, we have introduced writable signals. We also have used one as a local state search. We have learned how to create the writable signal, and we also have learned how to update it through the user input with set or update. In the next video, we will use the same search term signal to create a filtered products list generated from search term using computed signals. If you are enjoying the series so far, or if you have any feedback, please leave a comment. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.